Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, today we're going to be talking about the one and only Zebec network coin. Now, this is where we left off last time, right? Last time we talked about, is this coin a scam? There are some Photoshop issues happening. Most people didn't seem too concerned about it. But of course, there were a couple of people that still call scam, that still say this, that still say that, right? This is the chart from last time. Now, if I quickly explain it, it will all make sense in a second, just in case you missed the previous video. So, we had Zebec network, kind of going in a very aggressive downwards trend for a while, right? We are kind of going down sideways, down, we're going sideways, but ultimately, of course, we ended up still selling off. We had a decent pump, right? We had a decent pump on the Monday of, June 23rd, but then we can see many days later we were selling off, which means we also created a very bearish candle, indicating that we will go a lot lower. We can see, right, that weekly candle closes, and the next few days are practically all sell candles, except for the exception of Wednesday, which was a very weak buy candle, right? It was a very weak buy candle, but we can see something has turned around on the, 6th to the 8th, right? We kind of were still in this downwards trend, right? But we can see, boom, if we bring out the brush, we're having lower high, lower high, lower highs until bang, very big change in momentum, change in structure, right? We got this huge momentum shift indicating a push higher and higher, right? We pushed really high. We went all the way to 0.0037, going from 0.0024, right? So it was a nice rally in just a few hours, just in a day or two. We went up 53%, even upwards of something like 56%. Then we did have a fundamental pullback all the way down to 0.0031, right? Because this was actually a nice little support zone forming. And then we attempted to push higher. Now, I will say, last time we talked about is that, there is a huge resistance zone, and that is at 0.0039, which we need to flip eventually if we want to be really bullish. This, in fact, is the biggest and largest zone, unless you really talk about maybe debatably the zone over here of 0.002. And of course, technically, like, this is the biggest support. But if this coin is coming back down to retest this, then it has bigger issues. It has a lot of issues because fundamentally, we should not be going below 0.002 at any point unless it's just a temporary spike, maybe for a day, 2 or 3, or a couple of hours at most. By the end of the week, we should be closing above 0.002 if we were to come back about, above, if we were to come back down to these price points, right? We should not be closing below it. We should not. So this isn't like the next relevant zone that's really big to overtake. We can see that we did have a very big 4-hour candle rejection. If we go to the hourly candle, it was a classic institutional candle. Now, when we look at something like the daily, ladies and gentlemen, we could see that was the start of a momentum shift. Okay. Why? Well, for one, right, if we just remove a couple of things to make it more clear and easy for you guys to see, right? This box over here, we know it's a big resistance, right? When we rejected off of it, we did technically create a lower high, right? We have a high over here of 0.00361, right? The top of the blue candle is the high. And then we actually closed lower, right? We closed at 0.00353. Okay. So we created a lower high. Now, the only way that this holds technically is if we don't close below 0.0031, because then we would have two confirmations that we have officially shifted structure. Now, for me, if I was already trading this, right, if I was trading this, I would already think to myself that's very highly unlikely that we have a big rebound off 0.0031. It is more likely that we will pull back down to at least 0.0026, right? Just because of the lower high over here. Okay. We can actually see that we technically also did go into a daily institutional candle and sold off perfectly from there, right? We're not going to go into the advanced details how institutional candles look, but they look something like this. So, you know, we are creating lower highs on the daily, and we most likely will create a lower low, okay? Indicating that we are officially staircasing downwards. What we would need it to do for us to really hold the 0.0032 zone is to close the way we are right now, not go any lower, and start seeing some type of consolidation, sideways movement, and start looking to reclaim these levels once again. But this time, once we tap it, we actually don't really sell off that heavy. We start going sideways around it, and then we burst to the upside because we would reclaim this massive key zone. Okay, this scenario is less likely. To be honest, this scenario is less likely. If I were just simply looking at probability, the more likely scenario is that we will have a pullback to 0.0026 zone before we possibly could attempt to try to push up higher once again. Okay, possibly push up higher once again. We would have to see how we react off of here. We'd have to see if there's heavy momentum. If momentum would be weak, of course, and maybe we only go up to 0.0031, then we could see a bigger sell off rejection, right? Where we'd go back down to at least 0.0023 before possibly even going down to this key zone of 0.002. Okay. And that is just the reality, right? As of right now, there's not many confirmations that we will continue to push to the upside. In fact, there's none. We are currently again bearish. Okay. But do not be, sad. Do not be sad because we need to see how we react off of here. The positive thing about Zebec and its price action is that last time, before it got a nice pump, it actually did, kind of go sideways and do whatever for like 3 weeks. It had a manipulation point at one point in the third week. And by the fourth week, it pumped, right? By the fourth week, it pumped. So, do not be discouraged. If we do start generally going sideways for the next few short weeks, let's say another 2, 3, 4 weeks maximum, then there's a high chance that we will bottom out around 0.003 and then continue to actually push up very, very nicely to the upside. Okay, to the upside. So we have to see. We have to see how we react. As of right now, we should be going lower at least what? How much is this? Another 10% or so? At least another 15, 10 to 12 to 15% is my general take on this. Okay, because I don't see any huge, confirmation just yet. Now, overall, right, overall, as a project, I'm still super high on this coin. I believe it will be doing well, right? It's just that this coin pumped not too long ago. When you really think about it, it pumped roughly 2 months ago, a little bit less than 2 months ago. You know, it having a, pullback stage and going sideways, it's 2 months is not a lot unless the markets were really speeding up. Now, the only thing that is really going to be probably speeding up over the next couple of weeks is something like Bitcoin. But until, it's mainly altcoin season, these coins are going to be doing fundamental things like pulling back a certain amount, then eventually going sideways, and then eventually starting to recover. But yeah, ultimately, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I do believe, we will have to monitor and see how everything, happens. If we do close below 0.00316, then there's a high chance that we will be going down that extra 12 to 15%. And then we'll have to see how it reacts off there. But there should be at least some type of bounce off of 0.00255. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy. Of course, make sure to join the open community. If you want advanced information, call outs, and obviously a portfolio review, highly recommend joining the private community. Love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.